I can show you how carbon dioxide affects Earth's climate using this heat-sensitive or infrared camera which is purring away here, and a candle, this glass tube which is hooked up to this rather large canister of carbon dioxide gas. Now if I light the candle, you'll see that on the monitor the camera picks up the flame perfectly. Look at that, the hottest parts are glowing white. Now watch what happens when I turn on the carbon dioxide. Just keep your eye on the flame. The gas is invisible, so you don't see it fill in the tube, but as it comes in, you should see the candle start to disappear. There it goes. Look at that. What's happening is that the carbon dioxide in the tube is effectively trapping the heat. The candle's warmth no longer reaches the camera. Instead, it's absorbed by the carbon dioxide inside the tube.
Let's hear that again.
The candle's warmth no longer reaches the camera. Instead, it's absorbed by the carbon dioxide inside the tube.
Okay, here we go. CO2 has an invisible mass to it. So what we're going to do is we're just adding some baking soda to vinegar to create the CO2. And this is what's really kind of cool about it. There we go. Flow, so it can no longer see it. Now it's not absorbing heat at all. Now if you want to see how it absorbs the heat, you just do this. Put this guy over it and just don't smother it so that you don't extinguish it. Now what happens is the heat builds, and as you can see, now the paper is absorbing some of the heat. Okay, here we have a candle. We're just putting this little plastic container in front of it. It doesn't have much resistance to the heat flow, so we're picking up a signature through it. Okay, well, get that center, but you can also see right up here, and you can feel it, it's hot, and we're picking up the heat signature coming on out. None of the heat's getting into the jar, far enough away from it. So we're going to run a couple of quick experiments here. By just using some baking soda and vinegar, that's all you need. So I'm going to put a little bit of vinegar in here, put a little bit of baking soda in here. Creates a compound of CO2. And now I'm going to add the CO2 in. It's an open container, but as we have seen with it's marginal. It's really not blocking out too much of that. Now let's try this and see what happens. That pretty much extinguished the flame too. The flame is gone, but it's still heating. So now what we're going to do is we're going to bend the camera up. I'm going to give you the opportunity to take a look and see what we did.
Okay, the basic fundamentals of an infrared camera are nothing different than a regular camera, except that it looks for a heat signature. That heat signature can be blocked, and it depends on the mass and what it is in front of it. So if I'm taking a picture of, let's say, my daughter, and my son gets in the way, does my son absorb my daughter because I don't see her anymore with the camera? No. What that means is basically that my son is blocking her image, blocking her infrared, blocking her heat signature. No different than a regular camera. If I'm taking a picture of my daughter and my son jumps in the way, and I get a picture of my son and my daughter isn't in the picture, he didn't absorb her. All he did was block her. That's where this experiment, based upon these foundations, is in total error. And when we understand these basic principles, that this heat signature is being blocked, that CO2 does not absorb heat, CO2 does not re-radiate heat, CO2 does not generate heat, CO2 only blocks the heat. It creates a blanket over the Earth, but it's so mild and so small, it's insignificant compared to the warming that we're experiencing around the world. CO2 is not the cause. It's called correlation, does not mean causation. Just because CO2 and temperatures are rising does not mean that one is affecting the other. I mean, is the temperature causing the CO2 to rise, or is CO2 causing the temperature to rise, or are they both rising from the same source? The loss of vegetation around the world, increased thermal mass, because the sun is now able to radiate directly onto the Earth itself rather than being blocked by the trees and the vegetation. If we cut down enough of the trees and the vegetation, the CO2 levels will rise and the temperatures increase. They go together, but the one does not cause the other. Therefore, correlation does not create causation. And what science is doing is trying to create a correlation between them. It doesn't exist.